Jane, thank you so much for being willing to come on today and share your story.
It's no problem at all.
So why is it that you feel like sharing your story is important? Why do you personally want to explain to others in somewhat of a public way what your experiences in the World Mission Society Church of God were?
I will be completely honest. I saw your videos. I've been watching your videos for a bit and seeing the stories that like people have come out with and have explained kind of helped me realize and like get out of my situation with the World Mission Society Church of God. And I kind of want to help out others who might be in the same situation as I was.
So what is that situation? Can you kind of lay that out for us? What has been your experience with the World Mission Society?
They took me in when I was a minor, and I've kind of been there until I was 18 to 19 years old. And I just see a lot of people, especially people who are younger, maybe like 15 to 17, who end up getting into the church or the society, as they call themselves, I guess. There's just a lot, kind of. I've seen a lot of minors, and I've seen children who are getting raised in that situation as well.
So can you tell us, if you're comfortable with it? If not, that's okay. But can you tell us what area are you from? What part of the world are you in where you're seeing this group kind of get going after people as well? Because I know they're not located in just South Korea, which I think some people who just are fairly new to the group just assume, oh, this is just a South Korean group that only relates to what's going on in that part of the world. But I think as you learn more about this group, you realize that no, they're trying to spread all over the place, and they are all over the place. So anyways, long-winded way of saying, where were you at when you were a member?
Southeast Asia. Specifically the Philippines.
Okay. So do you see them pretty active in the Philippines over there? Do you know if they have multiple branches? What's that look like?
They do have multiple branches. They're in the farther cities, I would say, but I just happened to be in one of the cities that they did have a gathering in as well. But they do have multiple branches.
Okay. So can you kind of take us through your story? What was it initially that got you in? You said you were a minor. So what was the situation that got you to join in the first place? Kind of where were you at in life, and what was it about what they had to offer that convinced you?
Funny enough, I was walking out of school, and they were posted outside handing out flyers and asking if people had time to hear them out. I eventually walked past them, and I did agree to hear them out for a little bit, because they kind of presented it as an assignment kind of thing, which as a student at the time, I kind of was just like, oh, maybe it's something they actually need for something like school or something like that. So I agreed to hear them out. I was also going through an extremely rough patch in life where my faith was kind of just wavering, and I couldn't really make sense of my original religion, kind of. And the way that they have a way in which they talk about their mother god, in which, in a sense, it just kind of makes sense. So you you're drawn in because it makes sense at the time, especially if you're having a rough time with faith and stuff like that.
So can you recall what were some of the things that they would say about Mother God that you found to be convincing to you?
Part of it was how they explained the existence of Mother God entirely. They would pose the way that we believe in a Father God. They would pose that in a way as if there is a father, why can't there be a mother? There should be a mother, which of course would logically make sense. And they very much just play with that ideology, is what I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's basically, I think it's technically a fallacy in that I think it's an argument from analogy, maybe, is what that whole line of reasoning that they present, I think, can basically be, when you really boil it down to what's underlying it, is I think it's a textbook fallacy. It's just a fallacious way of arguing that says, well, if these things over here look that way, then that must also mean, that it looks the same in this situation, which just doesn't logically follow. It definitely, like you said, it sounds good when you hear that. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, we have a Father God. Well, why not have a Mother God? But what they do is they kind of coax you into thinking and processing those ideas like in our own heads, and almost your appeal to your emotions and your subjective way of how you personally would see the situation, instead of just saying, well, I mean, that sounds like that could make sense, but let's actually go see what does the Bible actually say. And so I think that's kind of what you find at the root of so many of their arguments. They sound really good on the surface, to an extent at least. But when you really start to analyze them and unpack them and look at what's at their foundations, you just see that it's just empty. It's just what do you call it? A house of cards, pretty much. So I guess when you were first joining, did you find that were they talking down a lot? Did they talk down about other churches, other organizations? Did they make it out as if everyone else out there in the world was bad and they were the only ones with the truth? What was your experience with that? Because I think that's a pretty common approach that they take pretty early on, is trying to demonize any other group, pastor, church, denomination besides their own, to kind of isolate you into feeling like they are the only ones with the answers. So did you find that you experienced that?
Yes, they exactly did that, actually. When I first joined in, they had actually started making me learn about Mother God, while in the middle of those lessons would also spread very Doomsday ideology, I guess. Yep. Is what I would call it. Mm-hmm. They would talk about how soon Mother God and their god, An Sang Hong, would practically end the world, and the only church that would survive would be theirs, because they claim to be Zion, the place of true believers.
Yep. So what were your experiences then? Were both good and bad? As you join this group, these things are new to you, I'm assuming, and then you begin to think that, okay, now I have the truth. So how did that kind of progress? And did you, I guess, what did you see, both good and bad, as you were a member?
Sorry, I am completely trying to think.
No, you're fine. Take your time.
I feel like the one good thing that I would usually see throughout the church, or yeah, just their sense of community. I guess it's twisted. It's very twisted. I will admit that, but it's nice. It's a good. It's a little nice having a little community who would 100% have your back, or so they say they would, and I've experienced that they would. Most of the bad definitely comes from the anxiety of like the Doomsday ideology. They have their own prayers and the like. Most of them are in Korean, and they very much, I don't want to say force it down your throat, but it's kind of like that. And also just the amount of general anxiety and the amount of talking down definitely comes to the forefront of my mind as like bad experiences. If you have ties with quote unquote famous people or anything that can spread the name of their church, they would definitely hound on you a lot, is what I've experienced. Those are the main stuff on the forefront of my mind.
So you mentioned Doomsday and their use of fear to motivate. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Explain that. What do you mean by like their references consistently to Doomsday and how they would use fear and anxiety? What does that mean?
So, there's a little thing within the society that they talk about how An Sang Hong, or their god, made a mistake and banished most, if not all, of his angels to Earth because of a great sin that they did. And with that ideology in mind, they would say stuff like, soon, when all his sons or daughters have accumulated in Zion, he will come down and take his children back into heaven, which would of course lead to the end of the world, condemning all his non-believers to practically hell while taking his quote-unquote children back into heaven with him.
And so you feel like they use that kind of doctrine to have more control over you and others?
Yeah. If you present it that way to especially minors, they would definitely fear for their families, their actual mortal families, because if you're kind of saying, hey, if this happens, you will be taken to heaven, but the rest of your family won't if they're not in this church, you definitely panic and try to bring in as much people as you can, especially if you care about them a lot.
Yeah. So how did your family and friends respond to you joining? Were other members of your family, did they join? Did they know? Did you talk to them about this? What was that like?
The rest of my family, I actually didn't talk to my family about this as much as I was afraid. And I think that kind of helped a lot because I had less ties. But with that in mind, I still was afraid, and I almost did try to get at least my mother into the church, but I never fully committed to that.
So you weren't ever able to get your mother or other family members to join as well?
Yeah.
Okay. That's probably a good thing, huh?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Yes. So how did it impact you as a person? And you might have mentioned this already, but how long, like, overall were you a member? Was it like 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, about 2 or 3 years. And as for how it impacted me as a person, because I felt like I couldn't really talk about the church to some people, it ended up making me feel like very isolated compared to like my friends. So I became just a little dependent on the church because they were the only ones who knew and like quote unquote understood. I was just very isolated, and I will admit, with the way that they were talking down other religions, it did taint me a little bit. So that 100% also worked with the isolation, because I was sitting there thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to actually go to heaven because I'm with the actual true religion.
Right.
But at the same time, fearing for the people I cared about, but I couldn't really talk about it because in hindsight, when I think about it in hindsight, who would actually believe me if I talked about Ansang Hong and Mother God?
Right. Right. Yeah. So what then were some of the things that you began to see, some of the questions or doubts that you began to have that made you start to I guess take issue with the WMS?
Well, I mentioned this, but the first thing that really actually jumped out at me is when they realized I actually had ties to a very large, I wouldn't say large, but a very popular news reporter, and they realized I had ties with them, and they continuously hounded me for contact information or a possibility for an interview. And the other thing that really popped out at me, and I think someone had mentioned this before, but there's a lot of love bombing when you're actually in this society.
So as far as like, I know it's different in different parts of the world as far as what, level of abuse takes place. And so I think for the most part, especially here in the USA, it's, I think what happens, how this group treats members, their tactics, and the manipulation and control, I think could be rightly identified as spiritual, abusive, emotionally abusive. I guess my question is, did you see aspects, behaviors, tendencies, way that members were treated, or relational dynamics that you would say would be rightly identified as abusive in some way? And I guess the next part of that question would be, did you see anything that would go beyond emotional and spiritual abuse? I know in other parts of the world, I have heard of physical abuse that does take place. I think that's not common in a lot of, at least the West. But I'm just curious, what's kind of your take, I guess, on that whole area?
I have never noticed physical abuse, thankfully. Spiritual abuse, kind of, in a sense of if you miss too many days of like a lecture, or like you miss something, you end up being kind of shunned a little. You end up either having a bunch of people calling you and messaging you, asking how you're doing, coercing you to go back, telling you if you don't go for this many days, you'll be considered spiritually dead and you'll have fully left your religion. I don't know how common this is of a case, but stalking happens.
Mm-hmm.
Which explains my situation. They take note, over here at least, they take note of their members, where they live, and at first it's going to seem innocent. They're going to offer to walk you home, especially because their sermons, if I can call them that, their sermons last until pretty late at night, which seems innocent enough until you miss a session and they show up out of nowhere with no warning, wanting to talk to you.
So did you have, I guess, like what's been the hardest part of leaving? And do you still struggle at all with aspects of the doctrine? Do you still have, the what ifs questions that I think a lot of members have, like what if I shouldn't have left? What if this is the truth? I guess whether it's something in that area or something else, what do you feel for you has been the most difficult thing about going from being an active member for a couple years of your life to leaving?
Definitely the hardest part is fully trying to shake off what they've instilled into you, especially that fear and anxiety because of that ideology, because it doesn't go away. It doesn't go away when you leave the church. It's still implanted in the back of your mind, and it's going to be there for a long, long while. I still have trouble with it sometimes.
So what has helped you? What have you found helpful to shake the doctrine? Are there any things that have that you could maybe point others to, or things that you personally have found to be useful in your own journey?
I'm going to be 100% honest. Therapy.
Yeah.
Therapy helps a lot. It doesn't matter if it's a professional therapist or if it's if you're a minor and you don't want to talk about it and you don't have the funds for it. Go to a school counselor. You can ask for those. You can ask for that talk to be private. It might not help a lot, but because it's your personal stuff and you ask for it to be private, there's a good chance that they won't talk about it to anyone else. And if you don't want them to contact your parents, that would also help too. But I'll be honest, talking to your family can also help a lot, because it's a scary thought, going up to your family members and just going, hi, remember that religion or that church I talked about? They ended up being somewhat cultish or they are a cult. It's scary because you'd think that like they'd get mad at you, but 100%, I will say, your family members probably won't get mad at you. They'll probably be shocked because that's a big deal, but they're your family. They're going to help you. They'll support you in whatever they can do.
Yeah, for sure. Did you find that the love, the acceptance, your family being there for you, did you notice that you didn't have that in the WMS ultimately? I know you mentioned earlier on that one of the things that was nice about joining and maybe appealing was kind of this family dynamic that you might have felt in the group. But looking back on it now, and I guess, did you have any other experiences since leaving that you feel like maybe that's not actually true, or maybe the love and the acceptance that you get there isn't quite the same as what it is in a real family dynamic, if that makes sense?
Oh, yeah. I did say it was nice, but the familial connection in WMS is very conditional, kind of. You can definitely see who are the preferred people, is what I would call them. You can definitely see that. And yeah, it's just extremely conditional, unlike actual familial love.
Yeah. If you don't do what you're supposed to, or the moment that you get out of line with what they want you to be doing, who they want you to be, then whatever love they have for you is withdrawn. And it seems like, very often a lot of members are given the cold shoulder, or even taken into, private and rebuked. And so, yeah, I think that does definitely seem to be the consensus among members that I talk with, at least, that the love there is very conditional. And I think that's something worth pointing out to people, because other people that are maybe just joining or have been in it for a while, they can, that aspect of it, of the family and the community that they might feel inside this organization, they might mistake that as evidence of its truthfulness, or even just as a good reason why they should stay. And so what your experience is, and what members who leave, what their experience has been, is that if you're a member watching this, I think, and if you're willing to step back and think about what you have experienced up to this point in this group in a rational, unbiased way, I think what you'll be able to see is that their love for you is conditional as well. And ultimately it might feel good right now, this community that you have, but I think as all the former members who have left this group have come to realize, is that their love, this community, is completely conditional. Their love for you is not a love that will last in the midst of your ups and downs. The moment you're not in line with what they want you to do, they're not going to accept you. They're going to, in many cases, they're going to make up lies, make up false narratives about you, to try to demonize you, to try to make your character look bad to other members, to discourage them from leaving. And again, kind of reinforce this idea of this kind of us versus them. It's us who have all the truth versus the world who is in error, and it's just dangerous out there. It's safe inside here. And so if you step even a foot outside of that door, they're going to make it seem as if there's something really, really wrong with you for doing so. And so all that to say, I just think if you're a member listening to this, and you feel as if this community, this love, this acceptance that you have, it might feel nice, but at the end of the day, it's not what you think it is, and it's something that will be removed the moment they no longer see you as useful to them. It's the love that you feel, I think, overall in this group. That's not to say that there's not individual relationships that are good and real, but I think overall, the love and the acceptance that this group and its leadership especially gives to you is based upon what ultimately you can do for them, which is just not really healthy, and is not really love. So that brings me to the question of, after you left, did you experience any of that, or did you just kind of make a quick cutoff, or did you hear rumors, any of the rumors that might have been being said about you, your motivations for leaving? Do you know if things were being said about you in that regard, or was it just kind of a quick break off so that you were not really hearing what the stories were that were being told?
I wouldn't say it was a quick break off, but I definitely did just try to tune out everything until I could completely just go away from them. The only reason I wouldn't call it a quick cutoff is because, like I said, they do take note of where you live and the ways to get to your house. So personally, they did hound me both through text messages, calls, messages to other social media apps, as well as going to my house and asking if they could talk to me in person. The few times they did catch me in person, they would privately kind of try and convince me, coerce me to come back, say that like I'm spiritually dying, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of just have to tune it out until you can just cut the contact, basically.
Mm-hmm. So what was the reasoning that you gave them for why you were leaving? I'm assuming they would have asked you why you're leaving. So what reasoning did you give them?
The reasoning why I left, I never actually noticed that they asked. I just left. They didn't bother asking anymore, I suppose. I mentioned hearing like stuff that was going on. I didn't mention your video specifically, but there has been like other people who have tried to expose them, and I did end up coming across those forums. And I suppose that gave them enough of an answer because they fully never questioned me.
So they just kind of assumed maybe that you had been corrupted, poisoned or something by Babylon on the internet. Do you think that's kind of what? Yeah. Yeah. So let me see here. I had a couple more questions. So a really common question that I get, probably one of the most common things that a lot of members, a question that they have, something that really keeps a lot of people from leaving the WMSCOG, is this question of, well, where else would I go? Where would I go now? What church has the truth? If this church isn't true, then where should I go? And so I'm wondering if did you have those kind of questions, maybe that exact question or something similar, and like that fear, that uncertainty, and if so, if you did have at least similar questions to that, how did you move past them? How have you dealt with kind of resolving those concerns that a lot of members have? And again, this concern that keeps many people, I think, from ultimately leaving.
Yeah, I will admit I did have questions like that plaguing my mind for a while, and I did end up kind of going to different churches, seeing other religions. Eventually, I think how I resolved it for myself, I kind of just tried to boil it down to let me work on myself first, which I will say to any members who are thinking of leaving or any members who have already left, do that first. Focus on yourself, especially getting rid of this ideology that they've implanted in your brain. Try to step back, take a look at yourself, see what you need, and eventually kind of just seeing other religions, seeing what best you clearly identify with, I would suppose, where you feel most at home and where you feel the most comfortable, because there's no concrete way of knowing like what a true religion is. The only way you can actually answer that is by seeing other ideologies and kind of just sticking with one that you most identify with and you most feel comfortable with. For me, it was Catholicism. So yeah.
So you've since moved into Catholicism since leaving the WMS, which would probably be quite a difficult transition in itself, just due to how much the WMSCOG demonizes Catholics. And so how did you, I mean, what were some of the issues that you worked through? How did you get from, Catholics are, the Satan, basically the equivalent of Satan himself. I mean, the worst of the worst. This is, the great prostitute and Antichrist and all that, of these things that they tie to Catholicism. So how did you get past those things into it being something that you could actually embrace for yourself?
Specifically, it's just undoing what the WMS has taught you. Because if you've left, you already know like there's something wrong. You already know that that's not good. If you're thinking of leaving, you've probably already noticed that it's not good. So the first step in doing it is just completely undoing that ideology. One of my aunts is Catholic, and so I very much had to just completely undo, because I don't want to call a family member Satan. I don't want to say that they're devil spawn, basically. Mm-hmm. It's a thing of taking a step back, seeing, like, nitpicking kind of exactly what you already know is wrong and trying to find a way to undo that completely. I had the help of family because of my aunt. My mother is also Catholic, so I had resources to read through, like, Bibles and everything. I had someone to talk to about everything. And yeah, it's just this little thing, just completely undo it. Take a look at it, destroy it from your consciousness, and you will be able to embrace other ideologies.
Yeah, that's good. You gotta start with the deconstruction part first. And I think a lot of members, hopefully you can see your leaving the WMS not as like it doesn't have to be an abandonment of faith, but just a progression further into, more clearly and rightly understanding God. And I think you can think of it in terms of like a renovation project, for instance. And so if you're going to go in and remodel a kitchen, the first thing you're going to need to do is remove the aspects that aren't working for you, the aspects that you don't like, the aspects that are not, in line with what
sort of a kitchen you want to have. And so in the same way, when you leave the WMS, I think there is that, you don't have to throw out every single thing necessarily that you may have experienced or learned even from the Bible. I have a lot of members that come out of this group that have a really deep knowledge of the Bible. I mean, they just have so much of the Bible scripture memorized. And obviously, as in their time as members, they were taught to memorize it and use it in, unfortunate ways. But still, there is that positive thing, I think, that you can look back and see. At least, that would be one example of members coming out who want to still continue on with faith, and they're coming out of this group with, a lot of the Bible memorized, and they know a lot of different scripture, and they have conceptions of different concepts from the Old Testament and aspects of the law and the different ceremonies, things like that I think you can keep with you and then just move forward and refine. But I think, it has to start with some of that. I think so many members, there's going to have to be this unlearning process. And it's something that is uncomfortable. It's something that is somewhat scary, I'm sure, for many. It's uncomfortable and it's scary and it's confusing. And, where do I go? How do I think about this? What about this? And I mean, so many just questions that you're going to have to walk through, I'm sure, as I'm sure you did as well, Jane. And so, but I think there is another side to that. There is that place where you can move through that and come to a place where you're able to look at things and things that before your indoctrination may have completely caused you to reject and revolt against. Now you can accept them. And so I think so many people are coming out of this group and they don't realize how deeply ingrained some of the indoctrination still is. And even this question that I mentioned earlier of, where should I go? If I leave the WMS, where else would I go? Because if this church isn't true, obviously no other church is true. When members are coming out, so many still have that question. And what they're not realizing is that, they think they're leaving the WMS. They think that they've realized that the WMS is false and that it isn't true, and therefore they want to leave. But then they're still walking out carrying with them these assumptions, as if some of these things that they were taught are still true, not realizing that they're doing it. And so I think, just like you said, just a big part of leaving this group needs to be, I think, is going to require some of that just stepping back a bit and learning what are these things that are really have been deeply embedded in me that I need to begin to take out and tear down and get rid of. And so, again, I think any sort of a process like that is going to be uncomfortable and somewhat scary and confusing. So, was it the case for you? How was that? I guess just keeping in mind other people who are maybe walking in that. I guess, what would you say to people in that? Again, thinking of those who are still in the midst of that difficulty and the fearfulness that is involved in that and how uncomfortable it is. Would you have anything to say in the way of like encouragement to those people?
I can understand that it's completely terrifying. And because you kind of just left something that you've been fully convinced for however long is, the truth, the actual truth. But the thing you have to remind yourself, kind of, is just, even though they are convincing, and I can't really say that, and I know how convincing they are because I was in that situation too. It's also 100% tiring just having this attitude of, isn't it tiring just having this attitude of just nothing is real except for this church. Nothing is real except for this. And now that it's kind of proven that it's false, how are you so sure that nothing else is the truth? It's basically just, again, I keep saying this over and over again, but this is the thing that helped me most. Take a step back and just let go of everything. And it's terrifying, 100% completely valid as to why it's terrifying, because it's ingrained into you. It's indoctrinated. It's just in your mind constantly. But if something that you've believed is the truth has been proven false in your mind, then shouldn't that be the first step in undoing the hatred kind of that they've instilled into you about any other religion?
And so as far as like things, members who are maybe on the fence a little bit and they're thinking, yeah, I kind of see what they're saying. I've listened to some other members. I'm listening to this discussion now, and I see what they're saying. I know they have some good points here, but I still think that WMS is probably true, and I should probably stay. Are there any things that you would point people to, like think about if this was maybe somebody close to you, a sibling, for instance, just to maybe bring it closer to home, the question I'm asking. So somebody, think of somebody close to you that's in this group and is kind of on the fence. And that them being in this group isn't good. It's not ultimately going to be good for them, and likely going to cause them significant harm emotionally, spiritually, etc. And so I guess, what would you, if it was somebody close to you, like a sister or brother who is just kind of coming to you and they're like, yeah, I know you left. I know you don't think it's true, but I still, and I see some issues here and there, but I still kind of think this is the truth, and I think I'm going to stay in it. Would you have maybe one or two things that you might point to say, at least just think about this, like look at this doctrine, or look at this behavior, just something that you could point them to about this group that would be a way of saying, look at what this actually is, and at least think about it. At least think about, can this thing over here, this piece of evidence or this behavior, can this really be in line with the truth? I don't know if that question makes sense. Basically, I'm asking if there would be if one or two points that you might point people to as a way of saying, look, this group is not true. And you can see that when you look at this and when you look at this, and at least think about these things. Even if they don't fully convince you, these things that I'm pointing to, they're at least worth thinking about.
I feel like the biggest thing I would point to as a default is definitely just how they treat members, because in hindsight, most of how they treat members wouldn't really align with any other church, because a church is a place of worship. There's no reason for members of this society to come after ex-members the way that they do. There's no reason for such harmful rumors to actually spread as a quote-unquote word of warning. There's no reason for that, because it's a faith, and if something happens to waver someone's faith, then that's not particularly your business, as much as you want to say just like, oh, but I could bring them back. If they've already left, there's no reason to completely just harm another person. The other thing is just how they go about their religion. It gives off a very I am superior kind of energy, which isn't really something a religion should be about. There's there's a thing of, I believe this religion, and I believe I'll be able to go to heaven with this religion. And there's WMS's ideology of every other religion is going to hell except for us. Those are two completely different things, and they should not be thinking of the same thing.
That's a great point. That superiority complex, especially when it's, in this religious context. I mean, if you want to know what was it that Jesus got most angry about, the times when you actually saw Jesus, upset or really passionately, going after something, you never really saw Jesus say much about the sin of the prostitutes, the sin of the tax collectors, the whatever it was, the lack of religiosity of the fishermen or the common people. You didn't see him going after a whole lot sin per se. Obviously, that's not to say he didn't mention those things at all, but when Jesus was upset, when you saw Jesus angry, when you saw Jesus, the people that he really had something to say about, it was these religious people who saw themselves as better, more superior, more righteous, and in a better place with God than others because of their own, piety and their diligence to dot their I's and cross their T's, and they just thought they had it all together. And it turned into their religion, the sort of religion that Jesus was most, angry with and had the most to say against. It turned into them having this superiority complex of us, kind of this us versus them. It's us. We are the ones who have it correct. All those out there are dirty and not as high up, just not doing it as well as us. And you'd even see them. You see the Pharisees very specifically make accusations against Jesus or his disciples that are almost word for word identical to some of the accusations that I see the WMS bringing against myself or other, other Christian denominations or churches or whatever. But what that is the Pharisees would come and say, this man, referring to Jesus, like, this man cannot be of God because he doesn't keep the Sabbath. And so you hear that would be very easy to miss. I think members just, many would just skim right over that and not really think about how familiar, how close to home that should sound to you. These religious people who think and they were doing many things correctly, but the attitude, the mindset, the behavior, it caused them to have the sort of character, their religion and their religious zeal and fervency and devotion, what it caused in them was not cause them to be loving people who looked on others with compassion and mercy, but looked on others with judgment and self-righteousness, and again, just a sense of superiority that nobody else is doing it quite as well as we are. That was kind of the Pharisee mentality. And so they would look at people like Jesus and they'd see that he wasn't keeping the rules quite like they thought he should be. And so they'd make an entire evaluation of Jesus and his character and his ministry based on these outward evidences, not looking at all at the fruit of what he was producing. And so I just think that's a really good point, and something that I think, again, if you take that step back and you look at the behavior, compare it to the Pharisees, go look at, and I can't remember the chapter exactly, but I think it's in maybe both Matthew and Luke, but I think it's in Luke for sure, where Jesus pronounces like the 7 woes on the Pharisees. And he talks about these things, how they do their works before others to be seen. And they focus on cleansing the outside of the cup, but they're not concerned with what's going on the inside.
And I think anybody who steps back and has any kind of experience with this group, who steps back and analyzes it, they'll see that that is exactly what happens in the World Mission Society Church of God. They obsess over making this nice, shiny outside on the cup. And they're completely, at least for the most part, seem to be unconcerned with what's actually happening inside. And you see that show up in how they treat people, like you mentioned, how they will treat other members, how they behave, how they talk about the rest of the world. You just see that overall, what is coming out of this group, it's not love. It's not the love of God. It's not, I sure hope God doesn't look like what you see coming out in this group. The behaviors, what happens in different relationships, how authority deals with those that are lower than them very often. And it's just there's so much messiness that I think if you've been in this group for any amount of time and it will just step back and look and consider these things, I think you'll definitely recognize these things as well. So since having left, what they'll try to convince members of is that if you leave, your life is going to go bad. And things are going to go bad. You're going to be cursed. You're going to get cancer. You're going to get in a car wreck. I mean, they'll try to once again use fear to keep you in line. And so, first of all, did you experience that? Did they kind of present that as did you hear that sort of thing communicated, that if you left, things were going to go bad for you? And then how have things gone? And have you found that to be true or false?
It has happened. Hold on, sorry. They have told me about that. When I first joined the group, they did say, like, if you leave this group, something bad's gonna happen. That's why we don't want you to leave this group, because Ansam Hong, or Mother God, will get angry and will punish you. There's also been times where I've kind of missed their Sabbath, and they kind of went, hey, if you don't come to the next Sabbath, you might lose faith and something bad's gonna happen to you. You could possibly get in an accident, or one of your loved ones can get extremely sick, and stuff like that. And so far, nothing like that has happened.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. Your life, from the overwhelming consensus of those who leave, is that no, their lives do not get worse. In many cases, they very much get better. And so definitely don't, if you're listening to this as a member, don't let that be a hang up. That's just when they try to make you think that when you leave, something bad is going to happen. That's just should be a red flag. That should tell you that they're trying to manipulate you with fear to stay in line, to keep doing what they want you to do. So, what has been your, I guess your thoughts about God and faith at this point? Like, what's been the biggest shift in how you've thought, how you thought about God as a WMS member to now how you think about him having kind of shifted your views?
I guess the biggest shift is just how I go about this. And I think this is a thing that a lot of people who left or are thinking of leaving can kind of relate to. I went from constantly thinking that the world could end at any minute to kind of just taking my time with how I live, I guess, with just being able to proclaim my faith without the fear of like, oh, people are gonna die soon, or like the world's gonna end like at any given moment in time.
Yeah, that's such a heavy load to carry around all the time. To have to see the world through that lens, and the way you have to think about people, it's just so
heavy and burdensome, and such a relief, such a weight off your back to be able to not have to wake up every day thinking about the world in that way, being afraid of, oh, can I listen to this music? Oh, can I spend my time doing this? Am I allowed to go to my family member's wedding on Saturday, or it's just so many restrictions and rules and just fear that surrounds all of it, which just kind of goes in line with what we were just talking about in terms of why leaving definitely is not something that will result in your life getting worse, because you get to get free from all of these, these chains and burdens, which they really are. And I know members would respond to that. Some, probably most, would just say, "Oh, well, he's just complaining about God's will. He just doesn't want to." Doesn't want to endure the obedience to God that is required for salvation, or something of that nature. And I just say, well, no, it's not that at all. I'm not complaining about God's will. I'm not complaining about obeying God, and I'm not saying that's burdensome or that makes life hard or worse. What I'm complaining about is the World Mission Society Church of God's false notions about what obedience to God looks like and what it entails, and that's what I'm complaining about. I'm complaining against the false, lying, distorted view of what God actually wants us to do, what He requires of us, and the WMS, what they present to people as what God requires of us, what obedience is supposed to look like, is just not. That's not it. It's not true. It's I think it is ultimately something that is burdensome and heavy. It's like the Pharisees, Jesus talked about how they tie heavy burdens and put them on the backs of those who they preach to, but they weren't willing to lift one finger to carry those burdens themselves, or something like that. And so I just think that's the burden of what the gospel really is. It's Jesus said, "My burden is easy, my yoke is light." And so whatever your relationship with God is, it's supposed to be something that is making your life better, more peaceful, making you more light. It's supposed to be making you into a person who has more of a emotional and mental capacity to handle the stresses of life. It's not supposed to add more stress onto you. Jesus came to take our burdens, not to put more burdens on us. And so I just think that's something that they have completely backwards in this group. And so with all that said, do you have any final words, any last things that you might want to say, just in general, or maybe final thoughts in more in the way of as an encouragement, or something that you might want to say to other people that are in this group, or those who are kind of in this process of trying to get out?
I think the best thing I can say is just do it. If you're already in the thought process of something's wrong here, maybe I should leave, maybe I should look stuff up, maybe this and that, I just say go for it. If your gut is telling you that something is going wrong, if your entire body is reacting negatively to the ideologies that have already happened, because it's, again, the ideologies that they're presenting is extremely heavy and can be extremely stressful sometimes. If your gut is telling you that something's wrong, if you're reacting extremely negative, if you've seen something that kind of shifted your view of like these people, I just say go for it. Do your read through the forums as much as they tell you. Just like, don't believe what others say, because that's something that happened to Jesus. People like shunned him for speaking the truth. There's a difference in in someone yelling at someone. Basically, they're comparing it to Jesus because Jesus said the truth and people immediately shunned him. But there's a difference in them saying something and then you seeing them do something that would completely taint your image of them. Those are two separate things. You don't have to ingrain into your mind that just like they said, oh, this happened to Jesus before, I shouldn't let this shift my view of them. Because if you see something wrong, then it's probably wrong. And if your gut is telling you that something's wrong, it's probably wrong. Mm-hmm. You yourself will know if you're in a situation that is right or wrong. So just trust your gut. If you see something that that goes against your morals and you would immediately think just like, hey, that's a little too much, just read through everything that they've told you not to read through, and you can kind of just see where you are